The other one we have is Mr. Hussein Jarwar. He'll be joining us in a few minutes, but he has 16 years of work experience of the community development and humanitarian programs since 2005. He has diverse working experience with the communities, with agrarian communities, fishing, farming, labor, private sector, and women. And he's the CEO of the Indus Consortium. And he's been working with Lead Pakistan, Paiman Alumni Trust Fund, and many others. And he's been under the, he's the CEO of Indus Consortium, an umbrella organization of 50 CSOs of Pakistan for 7 years. Moving on, we are pleased to be joined by Ms. Warda Malik, who is who's an investment advisor from SEED, having 15 years of professional experience in investment strategy, policy and development finance, had worked with a wide range of public and private sector initiatives, including investment climate reforms, public-private partnerships, education, public investment management, and has been a part of her career working with the multiple donors, including World Bank, IFC as a finance and governance professional, channelizing public and private investments for the priority areas on pro-poor reform programs. Next we have is Mr. Zishan Ashfaq, who is the Managing Director of Sotec Pakistan. He's an accomplished professional with over 8 years of experience in the fields of renewable energy and sustainable development. And he has, his skill set includes energy policy, market regulation, project development, public affairs, and international relations. Then we have Ms. Namira Hamid, an energy and public policy professional with over 6 years of experience working with the public sector and development partners. She carries a master's from Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, and he's the chair and founder of Women in Energy. So we are very pleased to have you. Then we have Mr. Ehsan Javed, a research fellow from Renewable Energy section SARC, and having 10 years, over 10 years of experience in renewable energy sector and working for the Regional Center for South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. He's responsible for conducting policy-based research studies and has been organizing capacity building workshops relevant to the promotion of renewable energy technologies for South Asian region, including Pakistan. So with this introduction, I think we will just jump onto the panel discussion, and I would like to keep this, to float a few questions to the respective panelists, and I would like to give a floor to each one of them for their insights on that. So just to begin with, I would like to raise one of the first question for this webinar to be on what could be the different financing mechanisms that can promote a low carbon recovery in Pakistan as one of the pathway from economic recovery from COVID-19. I would like to begin with Mr. Simon, and I would like to have the same question that should be that should have interventions from Mr. Hussein, Ms. Warda, and Dr. Sajid as well. So over to you, Mr. Simon.
Okay, thank you. I'll just start my video. So yes, now, first of all, for the power sector in Pakistan, I think what we're talking about is not just about economic stimulation and environmental and climate concerns. It's increasingly a question of rescuing a financially unsustainable power system that obviously the whole economy depends on. And so the context is, of course, the controversial IMF requirements and demands on tariff increases and overcapacity and increasing capacity payments, and the impact that's having on circular debt. So this really is moving towards ever cheaper renewable energy, it really is about rescuing the financial situation of the Pakistan power system. It has a world renewable energy to make those batteries. So with China already present in Pakistan through CPEC, there is a question of whether CPEC can be reoriented towards renewable energy and away from coal-fired power. Recently, there was some interesting news out of Bangladesh, where the Chinese ambassador to Bangladesh made clear that China is no longer interested in investing in coal-fired power in Bangladesh. So it's possible we are seeing the beginning of a shift in Chinese Belt and Road initiative towards, well, certainly away from coal-fired power and possibly towards renewable energy. And of course, we've seen China commit alongside the US to increase its climate commitments. So there's going to be some very interesting developments today, in fact, with some new announcements likely to be made, some very significant announcements. On the other hand, there's also an opportunity here for Pakistan to diversify investment in the power sector. If policy commitment to renewables can give confidence to potential investors and investment can be de-risked. Outside of China, investors and financiers have already turned away from coal and are now increasingly turning away from gas as a power solution, as it becomes increasingly clear that gas is not going to be a transition fuel, and the expense of LNG imports, which is having a significant financial impact on LNG importers. And many of those financiers and investors are now increasingly looking for sustainable investment opportunities. So many of the major global banks are now making sustainable investment commitments. Very recently, we saw Citibank vow to back $1 trillion in sustainable activities by 2030. So things really are on the move here. We need to see multilateral banks like the Asian Development Bank, which has previously invested in coal in Pakistan. They have a major role to play in developing nations and have the ability to de-risk projects and help anchor private sector investment in more sustainable investments. And we're also starting to see public finance institutions like the export credit agencies in Europe and the US shift away from fossil fuels. Even the export credit agencies in places like Japan and South Korea are indicating that they are no longer interested in investing in coal. In fact, South Korea is going to announce today that they will not finance coal overseas anymore. And so many of those institutions like the US Exim Bank and others, and European Investment Bank, which have moved away from moved away from fossil fuels and now looking for other opportunities, and that could be renewable energy. There's a growing pool of global capital around the world, from things like sovereign wealth funds, global pension funds, infrastructure funds, which are looking for investments. Increasingly, they're looking for sustainable investments. And I think another potential outlet, which is, I think, a very interesting one, there are the huge international oil and gas companies, which are now starting to pivot towards renewables, and they have a huge amount of financial might behind them. and they're looking for projects all over the world at scale. And I think they are concerned that they're not able to find enough of such projects, and that really is an opportunity for countries like Pakistan. We saw recently that the Italian oil company Eni sold its fossil fuel operations in Pakistan. That was deprioritized for them. Meanwhile, they are now looking to rapidly increase and significantly increase their investment in renewable energy. So with companies, the US oil and gas companies are slightly behind, but the big European oil and gas companies like Total, BP and Shell are seriously looking for opportunities, large opportunities in renewables all over the world. And so this is another opportunity for countries like Pakistan. And I'll leave it.
Thank you so much, Simon, for these useful interventions in this, about the how the financial institutions are shifting their investment priorities and their intention towards more investments in clean energy sources, and how it could be, and how the other countries are doing, and how Pakistan could be also looking into those ways and those solutions to move into that. With this, without any further comment, I would like to give a floor to Ms. Warda to have her interventions on the on how Pakistan could have what financing strategies could Pakistan have for this low carbon recovery. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Hina, and thank you for arranging this discussion. I'm really grateful to be part of this panel. So we know that, the opportunity to turn towards green inclusive recovery option has never been greater. And the governments need to make commitments for the economic recovery and to build back better. While we talk about the need to analyze different green finance concepts and mechanisms for Pakistan's green recovery strategy and efforts, I think let's also talk about the first challenge we face in the post-COVID scenario, which is how to move from the relief to recovery. A mindset, meaning moving from emergency response towards economic stimulus measures and reforms leading to a longer-term transformational phase. There's conflicting pressures on the government budgets, which have to be carefully balanced for all relief, recovery, rejuvenation, and development budgets clearly are not adequate to cater for all of that. I think, therefore, the government recovery strategies must plan to better leverage their resources for attracting capital from various non-public sources, including private, institutional, commercial funds. Like Simon Nicola also said that, there are various sources of funding available globally. There's a growing pool of large bilateral, multilateral financial institutions with deep specialization in green finance, with a portfolio of projects, thematic focus, infrastructure, transport, food, as well as a range of different financing instruments, grants, debt, equity, project financing. We have global green funds, we have multilateral green funds, we have sovereign green bonds, and Pakistan just floated a 500 million euro bond just for renewable energy, a part of the 2.5 billion that was raised very recently. I think it was, this happened earlier this month. Then we have bilateral green funds as well, and then private green investments and so on and so forth. So I would like to also say a little bit about what SEED is doing, where I lead on the investment advisory services. So SEED is the Sustainable Energy and Economic Development Program, funded by UK Aid, FCDO, previously DFID, specific for the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. At SEED, we've been assisting government of KP in investment mobilization in priority sectors. And the focus has been largely the energy sector, especially in the post-COVID scenario where development budgets, like I said, are squeezed and private sector investment mobilization is inevitable for the economic growth. We have successfully delivered a funding strategy for the portfolio of under construction, ongoing, and the large portfolio of hydropower projects by PIDO, Pakhtunkhwa Energy Development Organization. We are in the implementation phase. The aim is to make the Energy Development Organization in KP self-sustaining and realize its revenue potential for the government of KP using the hydropower assets of the province. And in doing so, also, we are aiming to contribute towards improving the energy mix of the country. Another intervention that SEED is doing is providing TA to the government of KP to solarize selected sector buildings, public sector buildings, through the ESCO model, which is Energy Service Companies model, where the energy service company is responsible for the design, construction, installation, operations, maintenance of the PV system, and the user pays for units of electricity generated from the ESCO model. Also, very relevant to the talk today, we also have embarked upon a scoping study to access green financing opportunities for the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Main priority areas have been identified, such as air quality, vehicle emissions, industrial emission reduction, waste management, renewable energy, as well as we are also tapping into looking at the potential climate finance resources, which we have just mapped. The objective is to deliver at least 1 to 2 transactions in the next 12 to 18 months. And we are very actively engaging with the local partners, accredited agencies of the other various relevant interventions of SEED for the contributing towards the low carbon recovery for the province and largely Pakistan. We're also trying to tap into the resources of the IGCEV International Climate Finance UK commitment for low carbon development to see if we can deliver on the volume of private finance to be mobilized for climate change purposes. Lots happening still at the nascent stage, but we're very hopeful that I just want to say here also that before we consider tapping into the financing mechanisms and various funding sources, it's also important for Pakistan to align ourselves to see green frameworks with sector taxonomies across the world. The eligibility principles, just to avoid that projects and the companies are not greenwashing or purpose washing themselves. Orienting infrastructure investments to be green, inclusive, job creating will also require accompanying policy and regulatory support. So I think a wholesome approach towards accessing various
that you're facing in the process, and what do you think the timeline would it be for to actually go to the level where we see it happening on the ground and the implementation being done? So yes, the steps are being taken in the right direction, and probably, of course, catering the other associated socioeconomic and environmental issues like air pollution and health and all those sectors that you mentioned. And it's absolutely remarkable to see that it's being catered in parallel and in relation to the impacts that we are discussing and how it could lead to a holistic kind of coherent approach for this low carbon recovery. With this, I would like to give a floor to Mr. Hussain now on the question that what would be his perspective on the subject. So over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hina, and on the behalf of Indus Consortium, I would like to extend sincere thanks to SDPI for having me in a very important webinar on important topic. As you know, that Indus Consortium is a civil society organization having more than 60 affiliates across the Pakistan, and we are working on the green recovery, fair finance, and irrigation water governance issues in Pakistan. Coming to the topic, I think it's a very important topic, and we all know that Pakistan is one of the country which ranked among top 10 countries who are affected or vulnerable to the climate change. And it's a good sign that current government of Pakistan is committed to overcome the issues of the climate change, especially decarbonizing private power sector in Pakistan. So I think first time the discussion has been generated by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, which is very, we can say, the encouraging. But we all know that Pakistan is a resource-rich country in terms of the renewable energy sources. And we have more than 1,000 kilometer coastline across, right from the Iranian water to the Indian water. And that area can be used for the installation of wind energy projects in Pakistan. But we have seen that very few projects has been initiated of the wind. We have seen only one of the major corridor, which is a Jhampir corridor in nearby Karachi. The rest of the area is still untapped. So I think we should shift from the coal and other sources of energy power, which are mostly contributing to the climate emissions. But here I would like to say that the role of private sector is very much important, as two earlier speakers has also discussed about this, that many banks, though they are lending or providing finance to the power sectors in Pakistan, and we have seen that there is a World Bank, IMF, Chinese Commercial Bank, and other Chinese banks which are also investing resources in power sector. And but we have seen that those banks has their own SOPs towards the respecting environment, and also do not harm the to climate change. And we have seen that there is a UN guiding principles on business and human rights. There is an Equator principle which has been signed by 107 banks in 38 countries, and other frameworks are also in place. But mostly these banks are not respecting to those, the SOPs and international frameworks in terms of do not harm to the environment. And we have seen that some of these banks have heavily invested in the energy sector in Pakistan, and they do not care to their SOPs as well as the frameworks. So it's important that we should work with these banks, and the government of Pakistan should work these banks and emphasis to them that they should invest in a renewable energy source which is available in Pakistan. Then that will be the beneficial. So Indus Consortium is actually conducting 2 research studies which are looking to the public and private finance in energy sector. We are looking that which bank is lending or funding into the energy sector, and how that is contributing to the either our climate change or it's in a renewable sector. So it's important that citizens should know about the funding trends. But unluckily said that though these banks claims that they are very much the open, and they are sharing the data with the people and the rest of the environmental groups, but we personally observed that accessing to the data of these banks is not that much easier, and we don't know about the the funding and lending trends of banks in different kind of sectors. So it's an important area that civil society actors and civic groups should work with these banks and emphasize and influence them that they should respect to the UN guiding principles and other frameworks which are available in Pakistan. The other study which we are focusing about the public finance of the government of Pakistan, and we are looking that either the commitments made by the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the federal government are translated into actions through increase funding into the renewable energy projects, or either they are funding to similarly the traditional, the sectors like coal and thermal and these kind of, the other harmful projects. So that is a very much important. We recently have engaged with the World Bank in a country partnership framework, and we have submitted the suggestions on the behalf of citizens of Pakistan and civil society organizations that World Bank should also invest in a renewable energy sector in Pakistan, and they are committed that in their future plans they will more increase their allocations in the renewable energy sector. Recently, we have seen that World Bank have also approved one RISE program, that's a resilient finance for resilient institutions for sustainable economy program. And under that program, they are also talking about the foundational reform in energy sector to transition to low carbon energy. I think that's very encouraging, and we should work with these private sector, especially the banks, regarding their priorities in terms of the investing more in renewable energy sources. So definitely, when these researches will be completed, we will share with you all for your feedback and wide circulation. So I think this is all about which Indus Consortium's perspective and which we are doing. So thank you very much again, Hina and SDPI, for having me in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think rightfully said, and highlighting, listening to the financial strategies from Warda and Simon, and coming up to the challenges in terms of the data transparency and the banks being able to support in this process is actually very critical. And this is where I think it's a very important point to highlight. Once any financial institution or a bank is committed to take such initiatives or lead, and how the think tanks and the CSO communities could be participating in their capacity and supporting this transition. So I think, and also you highlighted the untapped potential of wind power in Pakistan, and I think without to take more insights on this, I would like to raise another question, and I think that would be from what could be the role and the challenges for these renewable sources like wind and the green recovery alternatives in the post-COVID recovery. So Zishan sir, are you with us? If you could unmute and give your perspective on the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Hina, for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on the time zone. So, I agree with what the fellow panelists have already said. I will just, briefly touch upon the role of renewables, in this green recovery moving forward. As everyone knows that the COVID pandemic has taken a devastating toll on lives, livelihood, and economies globally. And, Pakistan is no exception. And, we need a green and healthy recovery as an insurance against, future disasters. And, renewable energy must be at the heart of, such recovery, because renewable energy can revitalize the economy by creating jobs, ensuring energy security, and strengthening resilience. It is important to note that, every million invested in renewable energy creates about 25 jobs, which is quite remarkable. And another important factor for, including renewables in this recovery plan is that the energy sector accounts for 2/3 of total greenhouse gas emissions, globally. And therefore, embracing renewable energy is key to fight this climate crisis. What is positive is that this roll over to renewables is inevitable and unstoppable, as we have seen in the past year as well. Over 260 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity was added worldwide, and it was around 80% of the all new electricity capacity that was added in the same year. And the share of wind and solar was about 91% of that total renewable energy that was added last year, which basically indicates a remarkable story of resilience and hope, even in these testing times, as we have seen. So if we talk about Pakistan, the share of renewable energy is quite trivial in the total power mix of Pakistan, and it stands at around 5 to 6%, which should or ought to change in the future if we are to move towards this green recovery trajectory. Although the new renewable energy policy has been announced, we don't find any implementation plan, that would complement the policy somehow. Simply having a policy would not suffice. The implementation plan is as important as the policy itself. And, being a private developer myself, there is a feeling among the private sector that the fossil fuel industry is still being favored in Pakistan, which is quite a dangerous trend, because while the world is moving towards green hydrogen powered by renewables, we are finding ways to convert coal to liquid fuels and gas, which are not, environment friendly, and they do not make any economic sense at all. And I'm really looking forward to a study that Mr. Simon is working on, because we need to tell the policymakers that instead of looking and investing in such technologies, we should look at renewables as a mainstream source of electricity moving forward. And we have experienced a similar blunder around 4 or 5 years ago, when renewable energy development was stopped suddenly, whereas coal-fired and LNG-based projects were pushed ahead with the government's backing, and the results are in front of us in the shape of expensive electricity and overcapacity. So moving forward, what we need to do is, we need to make the right choice and direct our investments towards green and renewable energy in the recovery plan. Otherwise, we will be left behind again, in my opinion. So renewable energy technologies must be at the center stage of our rebuilding strategies, as they are economical, they are technologically advanced, and of course they are socially acceptable. And a switch towards renewable can also help a country like Pakistan funds through a drastic reduction in fuel import bill that stands at around 14 to 15 billion US dollars, and it can be diverted towards education and health in these testing times. So that's it from my side, and I look forward to our discussion. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zishan. And I think quite a lot of information that we have had in terms of how renewables could be promoted, and what could be their critical role in the post-COVID era, and also the green recovery perspective. And I think the same question I would like to pose for Ms. Namira Hamid, who has joined us. I think she's not based in Pakistan, so thank you so much to join us so early in the morning. And so Namira, it's over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hina, for having us and also arranging this very important conversation that needs to be had continuously until we sort of reach a solution. So I'll keep mine very brief. Just to reiterate that a clean energy transition is absolutely critical to reshape the existing energy sector in Pakistan and shift it away from fossil fuels to zero carbon in order to, and this is globally, in order to reduce carbon dioxide emissions to limit climate change. And, you know, what's really important is that it has to rethink some of the unjust practices of producing food and agriculture, and also expanding human settlements in our cities. And what's also really what we need to be mindful of, especially to enable a green COVID-19 recovery, is that we need to shift away from some of the linear solutions that we solve one problem at a time, and we shift away from it to a more systemic solutions that address multiple issues at a time. And this would require immense public, private, as well as community collaboration that paves the way for an increase in economic recovery, while also improving our ESG, environmental, social, and governmental conditions. So on the same vein, what is also urgent is to decarbonize our economy, right? And this is all over the world. We see that the governments must lead first, for the private sector, and then the individual citizen to follow. And what is unfortunate is that our economic system at present does not adequately price economic damage or fossil fuel use. So it's absolutely critical that we start pricing where it's important. And the other sort of, really important point for the government to lead this transition is to end massive subsidies that sort of dictate the wrong signals to the market. And this is in line with valuing nature in addition to GDP, while calculating economic success and ensuring that clean sources of energy are priced accessibly. And the last point sort of that I wanted to mention is that during this entire clean energy transition, for this to be inclusive, focus on gender equality is absolutely crucial. And this includes involving women leaders in the decision-making process to ensure that the policy actions are sensitive to gender-specific needs that include, disaster mitigation as also risk management. So I wanted to sort of thank the organizers of this panel as well to include a gender sort of inclusive panel. And I'll end there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namira, for such incredible remarks and your contributions to the subject. With that, I would just like to, I think I forgot to introduce our senior research fellow at STPI, Dr. Sajid Amin, who is heading the policy lab. And I would like to give a floor to Dr. Sajid to shed light upon what could be or what are the most critical challenges in promoting the renewable and clean sources for green recovery, and also the challenges in implementing the green financing strategies. So over to you, Dr. Sajid. If you could unmute.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me, please?
Absolutely.
Dr. Hina,
yes,
great.
thank you.
I'm sorry for my bad voice. Actually, I had very cold water last breakfast. I'm fasting breaking the fast actually. So my apologies for a bad quality voice if it comes from my side. Thank you so much. Again, indeed a very important topic and very relevant discussion going on but I may be odd and evens actually. I'm not an energy expert. By training, I'm a macroeconomist. So please excuse me if you see some economist biases in my response. There is no doubt that COVID has brought serious socioeconomic costs, but this has also opened a window for some opportunities, which the world is calling the building back better. One of these windows is the green recovery that we are talking about. But let me be very honest. This is a very daunting task, actually, to recover green. Because the capacity to use this window varies across the countries, and with the poor countries like Pakistan having a minimum capacity. In the face of poorly resourced, low fiscal space, institutional vulnerabilities, countries like Pakistan face very competing choices, such as investing in social protection or in green recovery, creating new and bringing back lost jobs through investment in already existing job elastic sectors, or to move resources to sectors which produce green jobs, but they may end up producing lower number of jobs. So there are very hard choices actually, and this is where green recovery becomes very a daunting task, which I call. But it does not mean negating the importance of green recovery. I'm all for it, and I believe that a low carbon recovery is vital and is achievable as well. May not be in its ideal state, particularly. Before I go to the question that you have put that on the financing needs or the financing challenges, let me highlight a couple of points before I move on the financing side. Government across the world and Pakistan must understand that gains from green recovery will definitely outweigh its costs, no matter how higher are the financing needs. But the gains are significantly higher than the financing investments required for a green recovery. Some recent reports across coming from the world are showing that a green recovery can generate over 65 million new low carbon jobs, green jobs, which we are calling. And it's good to know that Pakistan has already started on green jobs through sort of 10 billion program. So far, 85,000 jobs has been created, but definitely this needs to be scaled up. Economic gains, economic benefits are enormous. They are estimated to be around $26 trillion gains from a green recovery. These are the economic gains only. The social gains are different. And most importantly, a green recovery can avoid 700,000 premature deaths from air pollution. So the first point that we need to assert, unfortunately, the overall kind of the discourse on green recovery has been more focused on the investment requirements, financing requirements, which is of course very critical. But I think we need to show also what are the gains. The assessment of socioeconomic gains can sort of make a case for green recovery. So that is my first intervention. The second point that is very important to understand, and maybe in today's discussion as well, while energy sector is very critical, I mean transition to green energy or towards clean energy is very critical in low carbon recovery. But this is just one component. Like our last speaker very rightly said, that this low carbon recovery will demand a very multi-pronged interventions, multi-strategy. There, for example, it requires investments in production structures of the country. It needs labor market programs to protect natural assets and green infrastructure. It needs interventions in technical and vocational education projects, which promote skills required for low carbon industries and resilient livelihoods. Countries like Pakistan may have very significant interventions. They need interventions, improvement in climate-friendly agricultural value chains and sustainable food supply management programs. There are many other interventions that has been identified by ADB, World Bank. So the point that I'm trying to make is that clean energy is just one component. The debate on low carbon recovery needs to go beyond this low carbon. On the energy sector, it's much more. The second last point that I would like to highlight is that when I see low carbon recovery, we must understand that in short run, of course, the investments in people, immediate needs, social protection and things like will take priority over the investments which are required for a green recovery. But the government must plan, and this is how we should also work on this one, a medium and long-term plan to ensure a low carbon recovery. So this is where we can sort of kind of contest the argument that there are limited resources, but we need competing needs. So I think we can come up with sort of the argument that it is not only in the short run, but we can have a medium to long-term planning for a low carbon recovery. And this will require a three-dimensional interventions. Number one is the investment and financing that we are talking about. Policy reforms are very critical to create that conducive environment. That will be very critical, and that requires policy reforms at monetary policy stuff, policy reforms in the fiscal policy side, policy reforms in international coordination on this one. And finally, the countries like Pakistan will require huge interventions in capacity building. So we need to build this discourse around these three key this one. And coming to the final, just I'll be closing in terms of financing needs, definitely government has to lead this one, but the financing needs are so huge that it requires a very coordinated effort from government, domestic level, private sector, and international community. So it requires a very closely coordinated effort from these three key actors to meet those financing requirements. In this context, in Pakistan, I think monetary policy, State Bank of Pakistan needs some very fundamental shifts in policies. Being a regulator, particularly in terms of private sector, where your financial market and capital markets are very important. What I believe is that so far the focus has been on the big investors. They are few in numbers. They have their own competing choices. So I think Pakistan needs to have a very vibrant stock exchange market, a corner for green bonds, which actually aims on the small investors. For that, State Bank of Pakistan need to take some very fundamental. For example, it is having sort of priority. It's providing a priority investment, priority financing for environment-friendly initiatives and projects. But at the same time, it continues to provide financing for non-green or non-environmental friendly projects as well. And the cost difference is very minimal between the two, green financing and the non-green project financing. I think the cost needs to be very high for the non-green projects. The cost differential should be high so that people have incentive to move towards green projects. So this is number one. Number two, State Bank of Pakistan, along with commercial banks, should have a very clearly outlined risk management strategies, particularly if we have to go for the green bonds for the domestic investors. We will have to very clear green sort of risk management so that it earns the trust of the investors, particularly of those of the small investor for which the marginal value of money is much higher, and they are reluctant to explore the new avenues. So we have to reduce the uncertainties to engage them in promoting this one. And commercial banks must be, it must be made mandatory for the commercial banks to have a strategy for green investments and the climate friendly investments. This is happening across the world. Pakistan needs to make it mandatory. On the fiscal policy, I'll just take 2 minutes more. On the fiscal policy, there are two options that I can propose, and we can discuss in detail later. First one is in the short run and immediate, is that fiscal stimulus should be aligned towards the green recovery. For example, the support packages like for SMEs can be designed in a way that the priority focuses on SMEs from the sectors which are green, recovery friendly, which are producing green jobs, and many other similar we can discuss in detail as well. But in the long term, medium to long term, Pakistan needs to move towards a climate informed fiscal planning. This is happening across the world now, that your budgeting, your fiscal planning should be centered around sort of green recovery or the green financing. I mean, it can be subsidies, can be conditioned with green investments, any tax concessions, whenever there is a possibility, must be linked to green initiatives. There should be a priority concessions and consent. Carbon taxation, I think, may not be that effective in Pakistan. So we need to think we need to go beyond best practice model of one such as carbon taxation. Given Pakistan's already very uncompetitive industry, putting carbon taxation may make it further. So we need some innovative solutions. And finally, I'll just close. International community in immediate short run can come with the debt swaps for green recovery. We have been talking on this one. And in the long run, the coordination, the collaboration between the local domestic governments and the international community needs to be structured around green recovery. I'm sorry, I'm sure I have missed so many things, but given the time, I was just sort of giving a summary. I'm available to discuss in detail. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sajid, for such great interventions. Despite having a bad throat, we really wish you recover soon. And I think rightly pointed out lots of good points, and especially at the end where you pointed out the climate-led fiscal policies that needs to be part of the government's priorities and the reforms that needs to be taken to support this low carbon recovery. And I think it's it's one of the very crucial area to look into. And I think with the series of this dialogue on the discussion and the debt swap that you mentioned, we'll be holding more dialogues and more discussion platforms on this. And I think all these points will be discussed furthermore. I think there are many questions coming in Q&A box. I would encourage the panelists if they would like to answer them directly as well. And at the end, I would like to speak them out myself and to the panelists. With this, we have joined by Mr. Ehsan Javed from SARC Energy Center, being the research fellow on renewable energy and having his expertise in the area and how it could help Pakistan in building up resilient and green recovery would be a good understanding to develop good understanding, further understanding on it. I would like to ask Mr. Ehsan to please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hina, for giving
the Dr. Ehsan, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you very clearly. If you could be a bit louder.
Can you hear me now?
Just a bit more, if it's possible. It seems like you're a little far from the microphone, so the voice is not very.
I hope it's okay now.
Okay, you could please continue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Hina, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak at this esteemed forum. I have listened to some great discussions by the leading experts in this field, and specifically Dr. Sajid had pinpointed and highlighted very important aspects of these green bonds and pension funds, things like these, which could really help Pakistan in increasing the financing for renewable energy and other green interventions in future. So I would just briefly point out a few things which I had sorted out. First of all, as we know that Pakistan has already introduced a new policy in 2019, which gives a very specific on the reverse bidding provision for exploiting full potential of RE in Pakistan. So this could be a game changer for RE in Pakistan. Before we had these reverse auctions, before we had these feed-in tariffs and upfront tariffs, which were not able to bring down the cost of renewables, but they have served their purpose by introducing the technologies of solar and wind in Pakistan. So by this reverse bidding, we are very hopeful that in future Pakistan would be able to get the renewable energies in cost of like 2 or 3 cents, as we have already witnessed in neighboring countries like India and China. So first of all, I would like to congratulate Pakistan and just to say that they have been very successful in coming up with a very good policy. Then on the other hand, on the implementation side, we have an IGCEP, which has been developed by NTDC Pakistan, the plan for forecasting renewable energy and how to go about it. I mean, they have included 20% of RE by 2020, and they plan to achieve 30% of RE by 2030. And the IGCEV plan developed by the leading NTDC and NAPRA gives the whole framework and whole guideline on how they are going to achieve that numbers. And let's hope for the best that the policy and this plan would go as per the planning by the policymakers. So my point is that we at Energy Center, SARC Energy Center, I would just like to give a few words on our center. We are here to working for the regional cooperation among the South Asian countries. And our job is to basically conduct regional level research studies on topics of interest of any member state. Plus we do the knowledge sharing events in form of webinars, workshops, and video conferences. We also do conduct capacity building of delegates, and in those workshops and in those capacity building events, we share the effective policies and effective rules, regulations, which have been implemented in neighboring countries and were very effective, and we try to disseminate the same information and knowledge among the other countries. So our motto is that multilateral engagements have to be conducted in this region. It's the only way how this technology and the cost of this technology can go down, and we would be able to tap the potential which this region claims. So the problem right now in terms of COVID and before that was also that in our countries, the main problem is that the policymakers do not have any idea on to how to avail the long-term financing for those clean energy projects. And there is a lack of understanding and experience in accessing the financing which is already available in green or clean energy projects. So how to go about it is we would like to highlight few points. We have done extensive studies by our center in the past in which we have sorted out what neighboring countries have achieved, due to which policies or due to which interventions they have been able to achieve up to, like, for example, I'll quote an example of India, that they have been able to achieve up till now 90,000 megawatts of renewable energy installed capacity in their country. How are they able to achieve that high numbers? We need to learn from their experience, and we need to install those type of interventions which they have already installed 5 or 10 years back, and maybe tailor-made them in according to our own society, our own country. So the first thing is we need to attract the private sector investment. Private sector investment all over the globe is considered a key for developing renewable energies around the globe. So this is a very important aspect. Private sector needs to be incentivized. Their problems, their issues needs to be addressed by the policy makers, by the implementing agencies, and those problems need to be catered by them. The another thing which we have seen in the past in these neighboring countries and also in China and Europe, that they have been able to tap the potential of RE by getting access to the institutional investors such as private equity funds, pension funds, insurance companies, and other RE infrastructure funds. They play a very critical role in providing the financing for renewable energy or the clean environment, or you call it energy efficiency intervention. All these interventions, they were able to get the funding for those projects. The government of Pakistan should also try to explore innovative means of financing, such as sovereign guarantees, which they have already done in the past. Green bonds, Dr. Sajid had already mentioned about the green bonds, partial credit guarantees. So these type of new innovative financing measures could be implemented or could be supported by the government of Pakistan for the investors, so that the project developers and investors could work out some kind of partnership in getting RE projects in Pakistan. And one another aspect is the Islamic financing facility for clean energy projects. Another one is the accessing SAARC development fund. So in South Asian countries, there is a SAARC development fund, a regional body, which is responsible for funding the clean energy projects for the South Asian countries. They have already given funding to Nepal and Bangladesh for up to $15 million for one single project. So they have financed projects of hydropower, transmission lines, and waste to energy projects in different countries. So Pakistan government could also avail such an opportunity. They could give a project plan to them, and they could get the loans and from that SAARC development fund on very soft term basis. So this could be one of the options for them. Then there is an option of establishing a development company, an RE development, infrastructure development company, like we have seen in Bangladesh. The company called Infrastructure Development Corporation of Bangladesh, IDCO, they have been able to give lots of loans and lots of grants to small RE projects in rural areas of Bangladesh, and they have been very successful with this model, whereby they give loans to them and then they get back the payments from the lenders who got the loan from them. So that could be one of the very good example for Pakistan to follow. Similarly, in Nepal and India, they have also implemented this type of small companies, whereby they give loans to small farmers, to small kind of economic intervention. Like in case of Pakistan, I would quote an example of Sindh province, where the poor villagers over there are used in the business of livelihood and this economic activity, such as carpet weaving, or what do you call it, this dastakari kind of thing. So those small loans through micro banks and these kind of companies could be given to them for development of RE in those regions. This could be one of the activity which could increase the economic activity in that region and would also serve whole over Pakistan. Plus, on the macro level side, I would say that there could be some regional projects in hydropower projects, or maybe Pakistan government could also provide funding for the electric mobility infrastructure in Pakistan. We keep seeing the electric vehicles on the roads, but the problem is that infrastructure is not available for their charging stations or something like that. So these are a few of the kind of examples, or few points which I wanted to raise for the consumption of the audience. A lot has been said by the other leading experts. So this is all from my side. I would say that thank you very much, Dr. Hina, and I would give my few points at the end of the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason, Javed. And I think very rightly emphasized the need of new innovative financing strategies to incentivize the investment sector to be coming up with more in RE sector and overcoming the challenges that are being faced, and also scaling up those investments in the country for the green recovery. Also highlighting the very important role of other SAARC countries who have been taking advantage and taking the right steps, using those financial sources and funds available and taking the measures. So Pakistan has a lot to learn from those countries as well, and how could how could we could beneficially, we could regionally benefit from each other's success stories and lessons. I think that is absolutely a key for that. And I think moving on, we have many questions coming from a huge number of audience we have today on the topic, and I'm very glad to see that the questions coming in all areas, and also so many comments on the subject. To begin with, I would like to go back to Ms. Warda on highlighting the two critical parameters through which green recovery can be aligned with Pakistan's economic stimulus, and also highlighting some funding avenues for pre-seed startups in Pakistan working for the environment, as venture capitalists in Pakistan are not keen on ESG investing as return on investment is quite low, while the environmental impact is high. So Ms. Warda, would you like to have your comment on that?
Sure. I saw those questions in the chat box as well. I think taking forward the conversation that just SN Javed Saab just said, and what Hussain Jawar Saab also said, that the lending trends in the banking sector, the financial institutions in Pakistan, and that poses a question to what you said about the pre-startups. Is the access to finance is one of the major problems that we have for the startups. Seed money is not available. Angel investors are scarce in Pakistan. So I think I'll just probably go over the couple of challenges that I think are very critical to overcome for us to be able to ensure that the financing is accessible to all small, medium, large projects, which are going to provide stimulus for the green economy and green recovery for Pakistan. I think leveraging the blending private institutional commercial funding and developing capacities within the private institutions as well as government bodies is very important. Without such clear understanding of various risks and roles by each stakeholder, and that understanding, if it's not there, the needed capital will probably not happen, especially given the heightened risk perceptions by funding sources these days post-COVID. And particularly in developing countries. I think local banks need to be also stimulated. Let's be honest, they're not going to start funding green projects on their own. They would need some kind of support in terms of blended finance to catalyze private sector investments in Pakistan. In specifically green finance, we have an example in India where Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency got a loan by, I think it was a loan by Asian Development Bank. And then through that, because of that loan, they could raise 50% of the co-financing from the market. Centrality of the international financial institutions, I cannot overstate the importance of that. The multilateral development banks play a key role in providing and crowding in capital and de-risking projects. I think de-risking is the key word for green recovery and to stimulate the banking sector to consider heavily investing in green projects. Green infrastructure projects in developing countries specifically have higher risk. New technology, a higher gestation period, specifically in hydro power, higher capital cost, operating expenses, construction risks, and they may not be able to be passed on the standard risk appraisal process of commercial banks. So I think to be able to attract that kind of crowding in of private capital, some role from the government and multilateral agencies in the form of blended finance is crucial for the domestic financial institutions to provide various levels of financing for startups, for the medium and large projects. Yeah, and again, one area that is not developed in Pakistan is the credit enhancement facilities guarantees. There's one in Frazaman, the window supported by Karandaz and Infra Croatia and Garanco. That is providing stimulus through providing credit enhancement facilities. So, I mean, these are all innovative financial instruments that can be explored. Yeah, so I think I'll stop here, leave with these thoughts.
Sure. Thank you so much, Varda, for commenting on those. I think we have so many other questions, and I would like to, and some of the panelists have already answered. I'm not sure if Simon, if you would like to have your comments verbally on the transition path for the low carbon transition in Pakistan. And if I could also couple it with having you being a technical expert and being working. So do you think is Pakistan technically capable for such large scale transition to renewables? So over to you, Simon. Yeah.
Sure. So the question, I'll focus on the last part of the question. I got it in the Q&A box, which was about jobs and how can a green transition promote jobs in the economy. And one of the criticisms that renewable energy gets all over the world is that there are less jobs at renewable energy power stations than there are in fossil fuel power stations. And of course, domestic coal-fired power stations need coal, which also provides jobs. And so there is often some querying over what a transition towards green energy means for jobs, if there aren't going to be as many jobs at a solar power station or a wind power station. But I think that misses a key point. And this is important all over the world. I think it's particularly important in Pakistan. And that is that because renewable energy is only getting cheaper and cheaper, it's got cheaper at an incredible rate, and there's no sign of that stopping for some time now. Because it's so cheap, it's large capacities of renewable energy can bring down the average cost of power generation in a country like Pakistan. And that's particularly important when you're currently in a situation where, because of the dramatic rise in the circular debt within the power system, tariffs are on the way up. And that's clearly not a good thing for the economy. That's not a good way to support the economy, to let the economy grow, and therefore it's not good for jobs. So the big impact on jobs that renewable can have all over the world is that it can bring down the cost of power generation. That helps support the economy, and therefore that supports more jobs. That is an often sort of, I think, neglected impact of renewable energy. And then your question is whether Pakistan has the technical capability to take on this transition. I've absolutely no doubt that it does. It needs the support, particularly financial support from the international community. There's probably never been a better time to be asking for financial assistance. We've got dramatic movements on climate action being taken, well, probably today by the US, and probably another announcement by Japan. We have already had a step up in commitment from the UK the other day. So these countries are keen for the developing world to step up their own climate commitments. So I would think that countries like Pakistan are in a good and fairly strong position right now to ask for that kind of financial and also technical assistance to help make it happen in Pakistan. But of course, Pakistan already has been installing renewable energy for some time. It does have some experience in renewable energy, which is more than many other countries have. So it's not starting from scratch. There are sort of more technical areas with sort of grid integration when when renewable energy capacities get larger that need to be taken into account. But yeah, Pakistan is in a good position to really accelerate this now, and that's what the sort of large countries like the US and the UK are pressing countries to do more on reducing emissions, and so I think Pakistan's in a good position to take advantage of that.
Thank you so much, Simon, for highlighting this. And I think moving on, I would like to, and in the interest of time, I think I would like to couple two questions for Mr. Hussain in terms of the any insurance policies available or financial insurance products in Pakistan to facilitate the vulnerable population who are affected by different environmental disasters, including flooding. And the other one I would just like to couple up is about natural capital accounting that the initiative has just been announced by Ministry of Climate Change. Do you think that these accounts can be used to aid the transition path towards low carbon in terms of accounting for the environmental degradation in a quantifiable manner? Would that help in shifting away from coal as a cheap fossil fuel? And if so, how much of a role can these play in green recovery in Pakistan? So in terms of communities and also in terms of how natural capital accounts could help in this shifting away from carbon intensive investments. So over to you, Hussain sir.
Thank you very much. And as you know that charcoal is one of the very critical project and a controversial project in terms of that communities has a lot of reservations and concerns about the construction, about the establishment of project, and also not taking care of the environmental aspects during the construction of that site. And they have also concerns about the land utilization policy, because local communities are, displaced from that particular area, and they have shifted to another place. But people are still, asking to the government that the available land policy is not sufficient and supporting to the rights of the local communities. That's why this issue has been highlighted since many years and is still not addressed by neither the Sindh government nor the private sector. That is one of the issue. And other thing is that there are some insurance policies available in Pakistan at provincial level in Punjab and Sindh, which supports to the local communities, especially in the agriculture sector. And that will be beneficial, but we must say that these are not sufficient enough to address the concerns and issues of the local communities. And the scale of these insurance policies should be enhanced and diversified, which is still not. And another perspective is that if we say that government has established 2 plants in coal plants into the Ther area, and if they will not invest more in a coal plants in any of the area of Pakistan, we are self-sufficient in a renewable energy projects. That can be at 2 levels. The level has been discussed and addressed by program, renewable energy program, that should be at local level. For example, program, just like they have announced the housing program across the Pakistan, where local banks are providing, the finances for the people who could not afford to construct their homes. So at local level, government can initiate a program, should provide a steps at public institution level, those lendings and access those lendings, and to establish, the solar plants at household level are them, because we have heard about and talked about the green jobs. This could be the one area if government can provide subsidies to local communities and they can establish these the solar plants at their own that household level. It can create a green job as well. So I think that government should take care of two steps at federal level as well as at local level that could benefit to the local communities, I think.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hussain. And I think in the interest of time, we're only left with 4 minutes, and I would just like to give a floor to a round of comments from the panelists who have left and would like to say something. And I would like to begin with Ms. Namira, if you would like to have some final comments on the subject that you thought could be insightful. Namira, are you with us? If your microphone is mute. I think we don't seem to be hearing from her, but Mr. Ehsan or Ms. Warda, if you would like to have your final thoughts on the... Yeah, Ehsan, please. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Hina, can you hear my voice now?
Yes.
Yes, my final comments are that I just want to clarify for the knowledge of or information of participants that green does not mean renewable energy. We have been talking about renewable energy a lot, but it also includes energy efficiency, energy conservation, electric vehicles, all type of these technologies which could build a more sustainable society that is included in the green economy. So one thing was that. Another thing was that we have already conducted few studies. Very recently, we have conducted a study on the challenges in financing of utility scale clean energy projects in SAARC countries. So I would like to refer to the participants who are interested in getting information about that study. It's available on our website. So if you want to access that study, you can go through it, and it gives very detailed information on how the other SAARC countries have been able to get the financing from all the other innovative measures such as private equity funds and these type of things which I've already discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ehsan. Very informative, and I think it would be great to learn from the publication that you just mentioned. And if you could just write in the chat box the link to that, we would be happy to. All the participants would be benefiting from it, definitely. So the last, I think, Ms. Warda, if you would like to add some final comments on it, and I would go forward to wind up the discussion.
Thank you, Hina, for this very, very interesting conversation and arranging for this. I think just the bottom line is that climate change and environment considerations must be front and center in the post-COVID responses that are happening around. And also that, ad hoc emergency response is not going to solve the problem. I think conditional aid to the private sector linked to a clear green impact is probably going to be the key going forward. Nevertheless, I'm very hopeful. After 3 years of a break, Pakistan managed to float a Eurobond. We have a green stimulus package announced this year. And so good things to look forward to, very, very positive developments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think it gives us a right opportunity to wind up the discussion with some key points that I could take from the discussion. I'm sorry of having a little low voice due to Rosa, but my summarized interventions from listening from the perspectives from all the experts, I think access to finance has been identified to be the key and a major hurdle and a problem for the green recovery in the case of Pakistan. And in this case, the local banking sector and the financial institutions should be catalyzed and simulated through innovative financial models and tools. Also, the requirements for these green financing in post-COVID scenario is large, and Pakistan's economic stimulus and fiscal policies must be aligned with these green recovery. The second point that was rightly raised was in terms of learning from the international experience. So we had a good representation learning from an international expert and also from the SARC Study Center in deployment of renewables, and also the other measures that needs to be taken in this transition. So it becomes urgent to decarbonize the economy, and the government must lead, followed by the private sector. The last but not the least is the cost of the renewables in terms of its investment. It's declining, and it can definitely support the job recovery. And it can also lead to a better economic growth by creating more employment opportunities and more to lead towards green economy. So these are some of the highlights, and lots have been done, and also not to forget the last point that was missed in terms of risk management strategies that needs to be addressed that could attract the local investor, having a pivotal role in the investment side and leading the green recovery. And also all these points are coming up under the environmental catastrophes and the climate change that we are pledged to meet the NDC commitments, and how Pakistan can take this opportunity to lead towards green pathways and green transition. So with this, I would like to say special thanks to all of the experts who have joined us from Pakistan and different parts of the world, and also all the attendees. We had a huge number of participants and question and answers. So it has been a really interactive session, and we will continue this discussion in the upcoming webinars that we are planning to do. I would just like to request at the end, if all the panelists could switch on their cameras, if they are comfortable for just a small snapshot for a record. And I think we'll keep you all in loop for further discussion. We'll share the report of this webinar, and we'll be happy to have your comments and more insights and contributions coming on that way. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I think the IT team would be able to take our snapshot for this last moment, and I'm really thankful to you all. Thank you so much. All right, great. I think thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Hina. Thank you all.
Thank you, Asen, for joining. Thank you, Zishan.
Thank you, Hina, for organizing.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Sajid, Aisha, and the SDPI team.